Cookie Monster sweater. That's only for the winter.
And winter is coming soon. So, um, all right. Hey everyone, for anyone who's watching this, I just want to do this demo. I want to demo what I've been working on for the last couple of days. Is creating a construct um, that allow you to run something very similar to a Lambda function, but more than 50 minutes. Um, and I put together a construct, and I put together a sample app that uses construct. Uh, I just wanted to show it to Jay and Dax to get their feedback, and obviously like for anyone who's watching, right? If you're interested in using this, you should definitely share your feedback, like what else you need on top of what I'm demoing, so we can put that in before it makes in the release. And if today's demo goes smoothly, we should have this thing out in a couple of days, like most likely this week, hopefully. Cool. All right, let's get started sharing my screen. Um, so the construct so the AWS service I'm using behind the scene to do this is like a code build, and it's very similar to to the script, to the gist I kind of shared in Discord like a while back, where let's take a quick look at the construct. It, First of all, this construct has like very similar interfaces as a Lambda. It has a handler, source path. These two, like the function, like the way we're building this, it's exactly the same as how we're building the real Lambda function. It's using the core, uh, the core runtime thing to build it. So it supports all the bundle options. So all the bundle options are here. The only thing that's different is in the bundle option, um, it defaults to ESM, and where for functions it defaults to common JS, right? So it has permissions, it's got environment, you can got config, you can enable or disable live Lambda, live debugging for this, and memory size and timeout. Haven't implemented these. If we do end up going with code build, there's only like 3 or 4 configurations you can use for memory sizes. So it probably doesn't make sense to take uh, it probably be like a string union for the possible options. Um, haven't implemented schedule yet, but that's straightforward. If you look at what this construct does is it creates a code build project, which the reason I like code build is it's so simple. It's really just one AWS resource behind the scene, and it gets created in CloudFormation is able to create it in a couple of seconds, and we'll make an update is able to update in a couple of seconds. Uh, I thought about using Fargate, but with Fargate, uh, I don't like Fargate because we are asking our users to think about VPCs. I think you could you know, by default use our default VPC, but our default VPC might not have like the right, subnet settings and stuff where it might not work out of the box. So if you're using code build, almost guarantee it works out of the box. And also, I think it would be like a very easy switch later on if you want to switch to using Fargate behind the scene. I don't know if you guys like it. Like we could also have like a mode where you can do Fargate mode versus like code build mode. I don't know if that makes sense, but uh, the right. So this code build project, it's we're providing a build image, and I ended up using this official like Lambda Node.js image from AWS, where it's really intended for building. If you want to build your Node.js Lambda function inside container, you would use this image. It really emulates the real like Lambda environment to some degree, and if you regularly have long running job, wouldn't it make more sense to start using something like Fargate for? Yeah, definitely. Just a comment saying if if you have a lot of long running jobs and if that's like a core part of what you do, I think it would be much cheaper to run on like using Fargate. So yeah, I'm curious to see whatever the use case people end up using, and if that is the case, then we should switch to Fargate or offering the other mode. But most of the things I'm showing, even like the build image you would use, it would be the same build image we use for both code build and Fargate. So most of this would stay the same. This build image is about 140 seconds, so it takes code build around 30 seconds to fetch this image. So there's this cold start around like 30 seconds to boot up the image. I'm assuming the boot up time would be around the same for Fargate as well, right? They just need to pull this image. Cool, and there's nothing much to this. And then the next step after we create a code build project, is that we build the code. The code is very similar to how the code is built in. You're seeing some background noise, guys.
Yeah, let me mute mine.
Yeah. Right. So the code for building the code, it's exactly the same as what we're doing for Lambda functions. And I also put in support for deferred build, so parallel build, so something we just released. And all that does is, you build it, and then you will set where the code build is fetching the source code from this S3 bucket. And code build, in the gist I shared, is you would spin up this container, it would download the code from S3, you would unzip it, and then you would run the code, right? That's kind of the gist I shared before. The problem with that is your build image needs to have like AWS CLI installed in there, because you're doing an S3 download call, right? And you also need to have unzip in there, which so you cannot use the the Lambda build image that AWS provides. It doesn't have AWS CLI and unzip method. So what I end up doing is, for code build, you can set the source path to be an S3 object. So for users code, we are zipping it, we're uploading to S3, and we are pointing the code build source to the S3 object that we uploaded. So the downloading, the unzipping, all that is handled by code build before the code get executed. So the Docker image doesn't need AWS CLI or unzip. That's kind of like how that works. Yeah, another thing I'm doing here is I'm creating a wrapper, because unlike Lambda, where it expects a file and handler path, for code build is straight up script. So I'm just adding this wrapper which does an import. And can you guys see my screen? Is it too okay? So it does an import, and then it calls that imported function, and it prints out the result. So I'm adding I create this script that calls the handler function, which kind of emulates what the Lambda container does behind the scenes as well. And so that's pretty much it. And then adding some permissions, supporting config. It's whatever the same stuff we do for functions. All right, so that's the construct. On the right is, if you look at it, is how we're using it. Again, very similar to functions. I have a secret stack which spits out 2 secrets, and I'm kind of passing that into my long running job. So I provided a handler. In this case, I don't have the source path, but if it does, it will work the same way as a Lambda function. And then I'm giving it a permission to I don't think I need this, but it would just be this. Okay, so if I run SSC start, let's see. All right, it starts up. Let's see what is deployed. Let me just log into my AWS account. All right, so this is the job I created. The way this is named is, whatever I specified here. Unlike Lambda functions where names are auto-generated, we're actually only auto-generating like a gibberish name for Lambda functions because a lot of Lambda functions are created without without user explicitly specified ID, like if you're using for a route for a subscriber, right? So we don't really have an ID from a user that you can set as a name. But for most of the other construct like queues, topics, or in this case the job, we know the name that user wanted to be called with, right? So we are explicitly creating this. What that means is even CDK allows you to create a job in one stack, another job with the same ID in another stack, but the deployment will fail because name already exists. Cool, and you can see this job, the source is set to the CDK asset bucket because that's where we upload the the file, and this zip file that we upload to it. Click in. If you look at the build details, the environment variables, right? Very similar to the environment variables we're setting for Lambda functions, as is the app stage. All these for live Lambda to work, and then we have our secrets set over here. And this code build has an IAM role that would be in a very similar format as the Lambda role, the Lambda execution role, where it has the SSM get parameters, stuff that we add to it to give the permission to fetch rules like secrets. So to the user, what's going on behind the scenes is actually very similar to a Lambda function. And since I run SC start, if I were to start a build job, right, you can see this is the painful part. On a good day, the build for the code build job usually gets queued for like 2 seconds, 1 or 2 seconds. But on a bad day, when code builds under stress, your build can be queued up to 90 seconds or even longer. It doesn't happen often, but we probably have, if you run 100 jobs, you probably see a couple of them getting queued for pretty long. So now this got queued for 33 seconds, which this is very far beyond average. This is probably like the like the 90th percentile, but usually it's not this long. But this provisioning step, it takes long, right? That is the step where code build downloads the Docker image, and I haven't used Fargate extensively, right? But if people in watching this, if you've used Fargate extensively, you can let me know how long does it usually take Fargate to download.
Really slow. Yeah, my last company used that for everything, and I just remember being really, really slow. I wouldn't be surprised if this was using the same stuff
behind
under
the
the
scene,
hood.
right? Yeah. So this is like the shitty thing, right? The provisioning took 28 seconds. And anyhow, let's see the build process. If you look at the log, there's this, the WebSocket sending the WebSocket message to my local. If I flip back to
Oh, it's
here, you
running
see,
locally.
yeah, crazy,
Yeah.
right? It's SSD start just works, and my Lambda function it just dumps, says it start, and dumps what's in the config, and prints some stuff out, right? So it looks like this. Node config is able to parse the the secrets right away.
Yeah.
That works out of the box. One interesting thing is this stub function that's sending the WebSocket message. It doesn't need to stay alive, right? Because like a long running message, unlike a Lambda, it's really cheap. Like you don't really want to hold up this resource. Usually long running jobs, I'm seeing people running it for like minutes or maybe even hours, right? There's no point for this guy to wait and for a local to send a message back. Also, for code build, like when you start this build, it's a synchronous process, right? You call start, and you can't just. I'm assuming it's the same for Fargate. You just start something, and right,
You
you're
control
not
the status.
expecting a
Yeah.
return. Yeah. So since you're not waiting for a response, like why wait? But I do have a timer that waits around like 20 seconds after he sends his message, in case he gets some error message back saying, oh, like there's no client connected, or there's an issue with WebSocket. So you actually will get like an error message here. So he doesn't quit right away. I quit around like 20 seconds after I sent the message.
Is there a downside to leaving it open? Because like, what if it eventually errors? Don't you want to see this as a failure?
You mean for SSC start?
Yeah.
Like you will see a log. You mean if the execution fails on your local?
So here's what I'm imagining. Let's say you have let's say you're building like some kind of email marketing product, and a user can go in and like run a campaign. The campaign needs to go and email like 10,000 people slowly. So we kick off our long running job. And I assume somewhere on the front end, you're polling to see the status of this job.
Yeah.
So if it fails 1 minute in, like you would want to be able to see that the job failed, right? Am I understanding that correctly?
But you're able to see that in your terminal or in the SSD console, right?
Well, I'm saying the failure status is part of the product, because there's like your product has a concept of like, I ran this email campaign and what is the outcome? Was it success or failure? And it needs to get that from what happened with the job in AWS, right?
Right. We are able to get that if we SSC deployed.
Yeah, you would be able to get that. Like, there's no issue with
right.
deploy, because deploy would this would fail, and whatever thing is polling would get that status.
It just, I guess we could make that an option where you could wait if you want to, but I see that would be kind of expensive or unnecessarily expensive. I see in like code build, you're paying, like half a cent.
Like, so the main benefit is like the cost. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not, I just wanted to bring up that scenario. I don't know if we should support it or not.
Yeah, if people bring it up, I think we should. Yeah, definitely add the option in. All right. MR is asking, where is this code running? Node index.js is running on the container. Node index.js, because I'm running SCC start, node index.js is running inside the container, and that's script is sending a WebSocket to to my local, and the actual this function is running on my local. Like node index.js is just like an empty shell where it doesn't do anything else. Yeah. So whatever you see in this over here is running inside a container, which sending a request to my local with this payload, and it quits. And my local receives request and runs, whatever is in the function code. Cool. Let's see. Note. Okay. That said, hey, do you guys have any questions? Jay, Dax? If not, I have a list of things we need to make a call on.
I'm good to go into those.
Yeah, wait. Talk about this the status thing that Dax was saying really quickly. I didn't quite get that. So when you deploy, how do you know the status of the job?
So Dax is saying that when you run a long-running job, there needs to be like a way to see if the job has. Imagine in SCC console we had like a long-running job tab, and in there you click on the long-running job, it shows you all the historical executions, and you want to know whether which one failed at what point. But how do you know if something has succeeded or failed? If you SCC deploy, the actual code is running inside code build, you could just look at that code build. Did the build job succeed, right? So the view would look very similar to this view, right? Which one failed after how many seconds, right? But for SCC start, if we are quitting after we send the WebSocket message, it will always succeed, right? So you don't have a place that knows whether something has failed or not. But that's only a problem for SCC when you're running SCC start right now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, at this point, it's not that big of a deal, because when you are testing, you're probably not sending like a million emails. You're probably just sending a couple, and you should finish within shorter time, and you should see the error in your terminal or in your SCC console if it failed. Right, but if you didn't see that, there's nowhere else to check. You always succeeded on code build.
Yeah, I guess this is going to tie into how, like, what is the client that we have that lets you trigger these jobs?
Yeah,
does the
that's what I was going to ask
have the
about.
ability to pull the status?
Yeah, so
No,
I think there's. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, X. Yeah.
I think there's two situations I can think of. The most common long-running job is usually tied to a cron. Like, I don't know if we've thought about how that all ties together, but it's usually something like, I want to copy my production database to my staging database every morning, something like that, or just something where even the email campaign situation, you might just do that once an hour to like process like everything for every user. So those are like, I guess, static long running jobs that you just need to like one instance of them that ever runs at a time. And the second, which I think is less common, is the dynamic ones. So that's like a user does something, and on behalf of that user, you deploy something. Mm-hmm. So the first one, it would be nice if we can tie it in with the cron stuff. I don't know if that's possible. The second one probably needs like wrapper libraries for like under the node thing, like node job, job start, job, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, this also brings up, we might talk about this later, but if this is implemented well, do you guys see people using this instead of step functions?
Wow.
Because like a lot of the
Yes,
step function stuff is to get around like the limitation and to like pull and
yes,
status of
if
things.
we don't make step function better, right? Like,
Right, right.
see the right the thing Dax described, right? If you're talking about DynamoDB, a step function could be pretty easy when it is a export and it does a polar that checks whether export finished it, and then you do an import. But it for a lot of people that are not familiar with step function, right? It's much simpler just to
Yeah, this goes along with like the thing that we've been talking about of SSC not being too strange and being pretty familiar. Like I
Yeah.
would probably shove everything into this. I guess the cost is the other question. How does it compare, Frank? Like cost wise with this versus like let's say like an express function workflow or something?
you cannot use step function express workflow because that right times down in 15 minutes. Um, depends on the nature of the task, right? If you do this DB backup thing, it would be pretty cheap using the standard step function workflow because there are very few state transitions, right? But if you're sending batch sending like the email case, right, where that assume have more um, uh, state transitions, it would be more expensive. Um, yeah, code build gives you 100 milliseconds, as 100 minutes of free tier. Yeah, I think
Wait, what is the
Fargate.
free tier? 100 minutes per account per month or something? Or
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Step function has I think 2,000 free transitions. Yeah, yeah. Cool. All right, let's move on. All right, my first question is, if you look at this, oh, I haven't implemented this, but if you are to look at, okay, so another function. So first of all, do you guys see long running jobs being triggered through some Lambda function, or are they mostly triggered through the SD console?
I wasn't even thinking about manually triggering.
yeah, I was thinking the other way around more. Of like there's like some stuff. The reason for me is because people will probably run into, not probably, but like you feel the lambda limitation usually off of like a request or something. It's like, hey, I can't do some like background work, and this would be a nice way. Like a request comes in, I handle the request, and then I trigger some like background work. This would be a nice way to kind of do that.
Wait, Dax said he was
You
imagining
think the other way around, like
all
cron is
manual.
the, no, yeah, cron is the more common use case. Actually, no, now he said manual.
Wait,
Yeah, right.
what?
Yeah, yeah. What did you think was the most common use case for this?
I did not think about manual at all.
Oh, okay. So you only thought about cron.
Cron or like dynamically triggering. Yeah.
Okay, if it were to be dynamically triggered, right, you probably have some function somewhere that you pass in the permission to the job, and then it gets tricky, right? You also need to pass some config of some identifier where in the code you're able to, pick up the identifier and and trigger it, right? Um, like yes, I am thinking where we will have something like long running job. Yeah, we're going to have this, and we'll probably do await long running job dot run I don't know what will be type safe, but in this case, it would be job, let's say. We'll figure out the API, which would be type safe, but behind the scene, this will look at, okay, it's thing called job. So you go look at something behind the scene, you try to load config.sst job ARN off job, right? So when the job is created, we can't. Let me see. Did I have it down? Yeah, I have it here. Sorry. All right, you can see when you create a job, we cannot let people explicitly create this parameter, which I say I call it my job. You create this parameter called SST long running job ARN underscore my job, right? Because users don't even know what the value of this should be. And it also feels weird where we're passing in both permission and config into here. That seems kind of weird. So in the application code, I would call long running job invoke my job and long running job, this module would go look at prefix my job with this prefix and try to load that parameter. Would this be? So one thing I'm saying is we don't create this parameter explicitly, just create it as part of the long running job construct, and you expose a config parameter here. User don't need to know what is in here, whether that's ARN or some ID or whatever. And then is it even simpler if we just did this? You just say, hey, I'm going to use the job. And we know how you're going to use it. There's only one way to use it. It's going to invoke it. So we're going to set the permission. We're going to do all the parameter stuff behind the scene.
That first one is already a common pattern right now. Like think about the DynamoDB table. You add it to permissions, you add it to config. Pretty much everything I have works that way. Collapsing that into a single thing could be cool, but it should work with the first one, right? The second one seems like it would just do the first thing under the hood.
I think the difference with DynamoDB is, right, you know what this thing is. It's actually a table, and there's certain permission attached to the table. That thing's like a native AWS thing, right? It's a certain permission attached to the table, and there's certain actions that I need to know the table name, right? But in this case, it's a job that we made up, right? User don't know if it's code build or Fargate behind the scene. And
I guess the config parameter is the weird one here, right? It's like they don't know that it has a config parameter.
Yeah, the other issue is the uniqueness of the job name. So we haven't run into this yet where we need to generate a parameter name. Oh, no, we did run into this. Remember with auth, I brought up if you create multiple auth constructs, like we have a conflict on the key names. But we were like, it was unlikely people were going to have more than one auth, so we just ignored that issue. But with this, you probably will have more than one job.
So what key names is it?
If I have two long-running jobs in two different stacks with the same name,
right,
the parameters are going to override each other.
you can't have that. It will fail to deploy. Yeah.
Because the parameter.
No, the code build is going to complain where say, hey, there's already a project with this name.
Yeah,
I
this
mean,
is
we should patch
isn't
it
it
early.
prefixed with stack though?
No, the stage and the app name, yeah, not stack name. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so these are okay.
I forgot what we were doing for Cognito.
I mean,
I think this is also the no stack name here. It would. Oh, but user pool name they don't have to be unique for Cognito, right?
It's going to be unique because it's this.node.id, which is unique.
And that would be the same if you have two Cognito in two different stacks, both called auth, right? So this.
Oh, that would be the same. Okay.
So the user pool name would be.
Oh, right. Okay.
Right, dev, playground, auth. But it works for Cognito is because Cognito allows multiple user pool with the same name. Yeah. Like, weirdly, but yeah. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, back to this. I do feel a bit weird about this thing, right? This like this config parameter. Like, yeah, what is that even, right? Users would be pretty confused.
I feel like it's not that confusing if we just name it job dot all caps job underscore name, or whatever.
Yeah, but like, why is it being passed into the config? Like, I'm not asking why.
Yeah.
Why does it work? Like,
Well, let's say we didn't provide this node wrapper thing.
Mm-hmm.
What you would do is you would pass it as a config and initialize AWS SDK and then do config dot my job and pass that in. So I think that is clear because I feel like everything else works that way. I get what you're saying about the Dynamo thing being native, but I'm not really seeing the difference.
Yeah, wait.
Yeah.
Wait, maybe. Okay, so I think for me the issue is like this is tied to the client we create, right? Like Dynamo, like we don't have a client, right? Like the client here. Imagine the code build. You were just using the AWS code build client or whatever, and there you have to pass in like the ID. Then it's like it's like the ID sort of makes sense. If it's like our own like client, then
well, if we required you to pass in config dot my job, then it would feel the same as using an AWS SDK client. It's worse because we can like do a better job of like providing. Actually, what was the plan here? Were we gonna like make long running job.invoke type safe?
Yeah, I'd want it to be. Yeah. So I don't know. I wasn't thinking it was going to look like that. I was thinking it looked kind of like config. It'd be long running job dot my job dot invoke or something. But I think the issue is that the config that you're passing in, if you're using our client, you're not explicitly using that config value in your code, right? Because the client is using it behind the scenes.
Yeah,
that is a bit weird. If we, yeah, I think this is the thing that you're saying. If it's going to be type say, and you don't need to explicitly put it in, yeah, that's a bit odd.
Yeah, I think there's a few issues that are kind of colliding here. One is if we generate parameters automatically for you, it is difficult for us to make them unique. So imagine if our table also worked this way. When you create a new table, you also got table name. We'd have to generate a unique parameter name for that. And then you can add table to uses. If we go with this uses thing, you can do uses table. But yeah, I don't know. It is confusing. Yeah. I feel like right now I would rather the first one than the second one, because the issue with the second one is now some things support uses and other things don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I think we all agree we need a wrapper, right? Because we don't want a user to import either
CDK, they shouldn't be aware of
SDK, right?
Yeah, so if you wanted to use the first one, then the fix here should be when you go to do the invoke, or let's say like there was like an init or something like that, that needs to take the config like explicitly.
Yeah. What if we just didn't generate the parameter at all?
Yeah, we don't need to generate a parameter, but if they're able to generate this, we need to create something that's not generic to, that's not specific to code build. We could say value is job dot identifier or something, where in this case it's the code build project name or ARN. Later it could be Fargate, cluster ID or something.
They said that they were going to take it into the workshop, but the problem is that it was like the middle of July and it was really hot and we couldn't like not have an AC even if it wasn't working exactly right. So they didn't take it. Yeah. Yeah, but here's the thing: is there anything that you could do? Could you give me like a temporary unit? Because on top of not having AC, it also like a big gaping hole through which like bugs.
Oh, you know what?
So if you have to take the AC, can you give me something in the meantime?
Sure.
How long is it going to take? How long am I going to be without AC? 380 Director Place, apartment 8D.
Does this
Yeah,
make sense?
this is what I was saying. That this is like if we didn't build anything new and we didn't try to integrate this deeply, like we would just have built this long running job thing, and then you can wire everything up through config yourself.
I guess it doesn't have to be config. You can use whatever, right? You can use the environment variable too.
Yeah, exactly. Like you would just pass it however you want.
But they shouldn't be using environment variable. I mean, like, yeah, because I spend so much time on config. But they can, they can hard code the job ID in their application code.
Oh, yeah, Damien has a few questions.
Yeah.
He's not a big fan of code build. Yeah, I think. I mean, Frank, you can sort of address this, but I guess it's like I think we want to get it to a point where like the internal implementation of it isn't like isn't being exposed. Code build just happens to be the best way to sort of do this right now, the cleanest way to do this right now. But I think the bigger question is like, what is this intended for?
Let's see. I think Dax shared a couple of use cases, right? He mentioned where it could be run for like data migrations, right? Like sending like marketing email campaign where you send a blast out to like thousands or 100,000s of like email addresses. I would argue that this is at least use cases we have in mind right now. They are not strictly tied to your application logic. It's to be similar to the ETL job where it's doing. I don't know. Do you guys agree with what I'm saying? Where it's the data like doing more of the supporting work instead of your core application code like work. Yeah, let me see. Maybe you guys can share your thought. Let me see if I can find the GitHub issues, what people have mentioned about why they wanted long running.
Sorry, I'm distracted. Liz is yelling at. We bought a new AC, which was very expensive, and it's not working. And they're being really annoying about swapping it.
Is it a portable one?
No, not portable. It's like big and heavy.
Oh.
And they're like, "Oh, we need to take your unit and repair it and give it back to us." And we're like, "If you take our unit, then we have no AC and there's a hole in the wall. So give us a new unit. Like you give us a broken one. Like it's, I don't know. They're being difficult."
Yeah. It actually, yeah. So like what Damien's asking is this for he's asking what is it intended for, and I think it is the use case we have in mind is not really for running our core application code. Like something, do you agree with that?
I thought it was.
I think like core, I seen like if you consider like doing a database migration and copy stuff over, or seeding a bunch of data into your database or into your data lake, if that's that considers like application code, or
I didn't see a reason to draw a line with where you use it.
Yeah, I guess Damien, like, do you mind sharing your concern, like, as in, like, why you would kind of not want to use this for certain like type of things with code build? Are you specifically saying a code build, or as in like you would feel comfortable if this thing was implemented using Fargate? Um, you can share more on that.
Yeah, I don't know if he's still on, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. Like I saw it, like I said, the email campaign example
Mm-hmm.
that like uses this heavily in application because not only are you using it to execute, you're also like tracking the status of it to the end user. I like it's definitely weird to use code build, so it feels like you're doing something wrong. But the constraints we have is we want a long running job that is built serverlessly and doesn't need a VPC. So if you use those constraints, you end up with code build, right?
Yeah, I feel comfortable with code build because like just from working with Seed, right? I feel like code build is pretty reliable. Yeah. Only complaint is it's slow to start. Yeah.
Email campaign should be SQS per email.
Yeah.
Sort of, but you might need to coordinate like the speed at which it sends, because you have like you don't want to like when you do email stuff, like you need to not seem like you're spamming people. I think yeah, like the official correct way is to use like a step function and like have it wait and things like that. But people like to just implement this stuff synchronously, so they might want to say like, okay, send 100 emails every 10 minutes, and this whole job takes an hour to send. So things like that. That's what have an abstraction and coordinate. Yeah, I don't know. Like I don't see an issue. Like ultimately, people need to run stuff, like write normal code that they normally have, and sometimes it runs longer than 15 minutes. And to me, this seems like a good way to do it. I don't see any downsides to using this over Fargate specifically, because that's how you do it now. You run a Fargate container.
Dax, do you know if like for Fargate use case, do people usually use Fargate to run like these like script like tasks, or do you use it to run more like service type of things where like a web server or
It's mostly for like your backend or web servers, or like Next.js, whatever it is. It's mostly for containers that are up all the time. But yeah, they do have this like I forgot what it's called, but it's like run once container type thing.
yeah. Yeah, I think we do want to make it flexible where people, if want to switch it down the road, they could, because I guess for ECS, if you have a flag where we like, okay, I want like the faster boot ups where I just want one instance or X instance to be always up. In that case, it'd be easier to make that happen using ECS than code build. Well, but the code build team told me they were going to have provision, was it provision concurrency or something, like the thing Lambda has, a provision capacity or something.
So
they said they're gonna have it. Yeah, they should have it in 6 months, but they said that 2 years ago. but I'm assuming it's coming soon. Okay. All right, guys. Are we agreeing on this? Jay. Yeah, are we agreeing on this?
Yeah, so I think in the long run we do want to think about some sort of users pattern. I do kind of agree that it would be weird to just have this guy and launch that with this guy.
What do you mean, like as in long running jobs?
Yeah, if you just did uses for a long running job, that might be a bit weird.
Yeah.
I think in the
Yeah.
future we should think about, but, like, to me it's the coordination between like the I mean we've like talked about this issue and it's coming up a few times, I guess, right? It's like the coordination between like your stacks code and the client that you have on the Lambda side, and there needs to be like a easier way to coordinate between the two. Um, but yeah, if we were to do something like the uses, I don't know what it would be, but if we were to do something like that, I think doing it just for the long running job is odd.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
think
Yeah.
when you told me about this the other day, the first thing I was like thinking of is like, yeah, when we do something around the event bus, or like if we did have like our own clients on the Lambda side for some of these other things, then it'll get us to think better about like what patterns we want.
Yeah. Okay. Good. This is the. What? Okay. All right. Okay. This is fun. So for SSD start, I figure there are three schemes where we can do to how we can implement SSD start. Right here we saw how slow code build started. Right, it's really painful if you're live debugging it and you'll wait 30 minutes to do a test. Right, that's the whole point of SSD start being fast. So approach one is like what we did, always call code build. And pro is locally, it's like perfectly simulates the production, right? But downside being unnecessarily using code build minutes, and the causes boots up much slower. Right? It's really long boot up time. Another scheme is we use a Lambda for local. For local, we don't deploy code build, we just deploy a Lambda with the exact same IAM permission. And we use code build for live. So for local, it would appear as this like a Lambda function where you go invoke. Because when you do SST start, doesn't matter. It's the stub is running inside the Lambda or inside code build. It does the same thing, right? You just send the WebSocket message for a local. We could do that. The downside is, I feel it's a pretty big downside where in our wrapper,
Yeah.
in their code, right, they need to know whether is this in live mode? I should call Lambda SDK. What if it's production mode? I should call code build. Okay, Dax reads really fast. I think he knows what the third thing is. You always put a Lambda in front of the code build. So this long running job, it's like a pair. It comes with a Lambda function and the code build, and it's always that Lambda function. You always trigger a Lambda function, and a Lambda function just calls a code build, or it sends request to our local, which code build is not even involved. So in that picture, it's like there's only one version of code build that code build doesn't really support, or the code build part doesn't support Lambda debug. It's still that Lambda function that supports it. And the upside is, it's very consistent. You always call it Lambda SDK. You're not exposing implementation detail to SSD node.
Sorry, I didn't get the calling the Lambda SDK part. What is that?
Because internally, right, when you do this long running job .invoke, internally it's calling, code build SDK or Lambda SDK, right? Like in this case, if you're using Lambda for local and code build for live, then long running job internally needs to figure out.
But it doesn't matter to the user, right?
It doesn't matter to the user, yes. Yeah, let's go through the option 3 where it's not exposed to the user, where whether it makes SC node like a lot easier to implement, where it's less flaky, and then stacks to it. And
Wait, what?
another
You guys can hear me?
We can hear you, but your stream is gone. Hey, he's back.
for another pro is that I'm thinking about the console, right? Do we need an extra tab for long running jobs, and then designed to support both SSD start mode and SSD console mode, where for the console then we need to implement fetching data from code build log group. But using this scheme, we can have like custom corners where, since we're always calling a lambda, the whatever we have in the console will still work. When you're in SSD start mode, the lambda function would just work like as if it's a lambda function. It just calls your local, runs your local code. And for the prod mode, where the lambda function will call the code build, and it could print out the log group, like say the link to the code build job and the link to the CloudWatch log, or that for the execution. And that's all we need to print in the console. And if they need to look at the log for the job, they can click on that link and goes to CloudWatch, and then they can look at the log there. It's like if you don't have the time to implement this log thing, and it's something we could custom corners and just give them the link. The downside of the third approach is it adds like a new point of failure, where lambda could fail to invoke the code build.
But hang on, in local development, the lambda would just run the code. How does this work?
So
how does this solve the not using? You can't hear me?
Yeah, now I can. Yeah.
How does this solve not using code build in local development?
Because when you run SSD start, the lambda function would never call code build.
Just call it'll forward to your local.
Yeah.
But in production, we would deploy some kind of static code that would just call. Yeah. That makes sense. I feel like I'm okay with one for now to see if it's like really a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But I see 3 as like maybe something we upgrade to.
The problem is, one is when you're using it, it's really frustrating, right? Because every code change, if you want to retry and stuff, it takes like 30 seconds to boot up. Like we could do some other hacks as like use a different Docker image, where for SSD local, let's say using some Alpine, like 30 megabyte image, where it would be, if I remember correctly, it's like 5 to 7 seconds boot up time, but you still could get queued, or even 5 to 7 seconds is pretty slow.
Yeah.
Given our SSD start standard.
Yeah, that makes sense. Can 3 be implemented with that like God function we have?
No, I kind of want to restrict that God function to only handle custom resources. There's no reason, but I was thinking, yeah. Plus, I think for 3, I guess another question is, right, it's related to the console, right? How much effort we want to put in the console right now, especially for SST console mode. Do we want to show a list of historical executions, which one have succeeded and failed? Because 3 requires the least amount of like console work, where we could just really, it should already work as it is, right? You invoking a Lambda function. The Lambda function is going to print out a link to code build log and code build ID, where like a CloudWatch link, you can click to build the logs. So we don't have to implement a proper console. Or do you guys feel strongly about implementing the proper console? And the proper console would look very similar to our functions tab, where there's one column of all the functions or all the jobs. You click, you might have another panel for all the runs, and you click on the run, it will show you the log.
In terms of like the console, what would be the ideal experience then? Is it like similar to the code build console then? You're just showing like a
Yeah.
list of all the jobs and stuff, and then you click in,
Yeah.
you can see their logs.
Yeah.
In local, how would that work?
In local, the local, you should look exactly like our current functions tab, right? We don't show you historical runs. It's just, you click on the job, and then it's, it shows you live debug log.
Okay, and then okay, that seems fine. And in when it's in live, why can't we just pull the? Why do we have to do this link thing? Why can't we just like pull out the code build log and show it in there?
It means we could. You just added work. Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like we should launch just the construct, because I feel like we don't. I mean, just based off some of the questions that came up, it seems like people are using this differently, or like have different perceptions about this than I had. So I feel like it may be helpful to see what people use it for.
And if let's say we were to do just the construct, how would we get them to see the logs? I guess we just tell them for now that you should go into the code build console to see it, or
Probably.
For ST start or ST deploy.
I guess deploy.
If you go with design number 3, then they will see that in a Lambda log with a link to code build, where they will go there and see.
Yeah, I mean, option number three isn't bad.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, so we'll go with 3 for now. We probably won't even have a long-running job. The function will just show up under the functions tab for now.
I think that makes sense.
Not in the long run, but for now, I think that makes sense.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
this is something that a lot of people complain about. I cannot run something, I cannot have a long-running task with Lambda functions, but I haven't heard exactly what they wanted to run from them. But it's not hard to gather, not hard to guess. But I'm just saying, I haven't. So I kind of want to put it out, like Dak said, put it out, see how people use it.
Yeah, I think Damien put some of his thoughts in the Discord in general.
Mm.
But I think it is similar to what we're sort of saying here. It's not totally clear what the exact use cases are. I feel like it's going to end up as a catch-all type thing for all these random tasks.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's go over the rest of the questions.
Yep.
Right, we need the client-side code to invoke the functions, as obvious. Right, do we need this to accept input? Thinking,
What does that mean? Accept input?
as in, we'll invoke this function to want to pass in some argument.
Oh yeah, I was gonna ask about that.
Yeah.
It probably does.
Right, does it need to be scheduled, like the first version?
Yeah, it depends how people feel about this one. I didn't think that the first version needed that, but I can see it.
Okay, I'm gonna go with no. They could put like a cron job and this together, and if they ask, then we could. Even for input, what if we don't support it in V1? And no, actually, input, I think we should. I'm thinking we should because it makes the UI easier. We don't have to.
The UI for
For the console.
why is that?
Because if we are reusing the functions tab, when you try to trigger something, you can pass in.
I see. So when you pass in the thing through the event there, it's effectively the same as you doing dot invoke in your code.
Yeah. Okay. And the last thing is naming. What do we call this? That's what I don't like about the script.
Not
construct,
long
right?
running job. And have it.
I was thinking if you call it something like a long running function or long function or extended function, that makes it confusing whether default function props apply to these or not.
Yeah, I would actually not describe it using the fact that it can run for a long time. I think maybe it's better to communicate it in a different way. Like, I think this job is fine.
I won't call this guy script.
Why?
And it's like our task, our
Okay.
script.
No, I don't like script because like I said, you can use this for your application stuff. Task can work. Task and job in my head are kind of interchangeable.
Yeah. Yeah, job. I think I like job.
Do you guys want to do, what Next.js does is like,
What is going on here?
Hey, Frank, I need to ask you about something unrelated because Christine is hitting like a blocking issue. Do you remember how I sent a few messages a while ago about how that change we made for checking to see if the environment has changed, and we kill the old containers on local development?
Yeah.
There's a bug with that because if it spins up two in parallel, it just kills the older one.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so this is like, it was causing a little bit of annoyance for me, but I think it's causing like a blocking problem for some other people. So can I just roll this back? It'll break the config case, but that seems less common than in this case.
Yeah, can we kill all the containers or all the running instances?
No, the problem is that they should not be killed. Because it'll make, so if you have two requests, request A, request B, that go to the same function, A starts the process and gets killed, and it just gets stuck in pending. So it needs to not. I have a way to fix this. Like, we need to just generate an ID on the stub and map a local process to the same. So if there's two instances running in the cloud, there's two instances running locally. But yeah, I don't want to do that just for this fix.
I think we can end the stream now, right? And this?
Yeah, I think